Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. So, I've been going through some pretty disturbing case files from Alaska, and I gotta tell you, there's a pattern here that nobody wants to acknowledge. We're talking about people who know what they're doing. Professionals, experts, the kind of folks who've survived situations that would kill most of us in minutes, and they're all disappearing the same way. Here's what got me obsessed with this. A search and rescue coordinator with 15 years' experience goes looking for a missing hiker. She finds him, brings him back. Case closed, right? Wrong. Because 6 months later, she gets a call. From herself. Same voice, same mannerisms. Asking about valley locations that don't exist on any map. Tonight I'm walking you through 8 cases that made me lose sleep. And I'm not exaggerating. After you hear what happened to that glaciologist in the Chugach Mountains, you'll understand why his final journal entry just says, "We should never have come back." New here? Hit subscribe. I cover the stuff that official reports conveniently leave out. All right, let's get into it. Case number 1. And trust me, this one sets the tone for everything that follows. My name is Dr. Marcus Kellerman, and I used to be one of Alaska's most respected wilderness explorers. 23 years I spent mapping uncharted territories, leading scientific expeditions, and rescuing lost hikers from the most dangerous corners of the last frontier. I held the state record for successful wilderness rescues. 47 people brought home alive from situations where others had given up hope. My wife Sarah always said I cared more about those frozen mountains than I did about her. She wasn't wrong. After our divorce in 2019, after my daughter Emma stopped returning my calls, the wilderness became everything to me. It was the only place where I felt like I mattered, where my skills meant something, where I could save people instead of destroying the relationships that should have mattered most. But what happened during my final expedition in June 2024 proved that some people can't be saved, especially not from themselves. I was leading a botanical survey team into the remote Chilkat Range. Dr. Janet Morrison, a plant pathologist from UAF, her graduate student Kevin Chen, and wildlife photographer Tom Bradley. We were investigating reports of unusual plant activity that had been disrupting local wildlife migration patterns. Native hunting guides had reported entire valleys where no animals would venture, where even the mosquitoes wouldn't bite. I should have listened to those guides. The Tlingit elders had stories about that valley, places where the forest dreamed, where plants learned to think like men. But I was Dr. Marcus Kellerman, legendary Alaskan explorer, and I didn't believe in native superstitions. The helicopter dropped us at the valley entrance on a Tuesday morning. Perfect weather, clear skies, 68 degrees. We had supplies for 10 days and satellite communication equipment that should have kept us connected to base camp. Should have. The first sign something was wrong came 3 miles into the valley. Kevin noticed it first, complete silence. No bird song, no insect buzzing, no small animals rustling through the underbrush. The forest felt dead, but it wasn't dead. It was waiting. By day 2, we'd found the source of the disturbance. A massive colony of flowering plants covering nearly 6 acres in the valley's heart. Deep red blooms the size of dinner plates, growing on thick stalks that reached 8 feet tall. Janet had never seen anything like them. They didn't match any known Alaskan flora, or any flora period. But it wasn't just the plants themselves that unsettled us. It was how they moved. Subtle at first, flowers tracking our movement like sunflowers follow the sun, except these followed us even when we moved away from the light. By the 3rd day, the movement was more obvious. Vines reaching toward us when we walked past. Roots breaking through the soil surface, forming patterns that looked almost like pathways. Janet was fascinated. She spent hours taking samples, documenting growth patterns, measuring the plant's responses to various stimuli. She discovered they were communicating, chemical signals passing between individuals so complex it suggested a form of distributed intelligence. Tom was getting incredible photographs. The plants seemed to pose for him, arranging themselves in the most photogenic formations when he set up his equipment. He joked that they were more cooperative than most wildlife subjects. Kevin was the first to touch one directly. We were setting up camp on our fourth evening when he knelt beside one of the smaller specimens. "It's warm," he called out, "like it has body heat." Before anyone could stop him, he placed his palm flat against one of the red blooms. The scream that tore from his throat wasn't human. It was something primal, terrified and ecstatic all at once. He convulsed for maybe 10 seconds, then went completely still, his hand still pressed against the flower. When he finally pulled away, his eyes had changed. The pupils were dilated, and there were flecks of green in his brown irises. He looked at us with an expression of wonder I'd never seen on a human face. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "They're so much more than we thought. They want to show us something." That night, Kevin disappeared from his tent. We found him at dawn, standing naked in the center of the plant colony, his arms spread wide, dozens of vines wrapped around his body like he was being embraced. His skin had patches of green discoloration, and when he smiled at us, his teeth had thin brown veins running through the enamel like root systems. "You have to feel this, Marcus," he said, his voice carrying strange harmonics, like multiple people speaking in unison. "They've been waiting so long for someone to understand. They remember everything, every animal, every person who's ever entered their territory. And now I remember it too." Janet tried to approach him with a sedative, but the plants wouldn't let her get close. Vines erupted from the ground, blocking her path, while others reached out to caress Kevin's transformed body like he was their beloved child. Tom was taking pictures, documenting everything, but his hands were shaking so badly most of the shots came out blurred. "We need to get out of here," he kept saying. "We need to call for extraction." That's when we discovered our satellite phone was dead. Not broken, dead. Like the battery had been drained, but it showed full charge on the display. Our GPS units were giving impossible readings, showing us locations hundreds of miles from where we actually were. Even our mechanical compass spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. On the fifth night, Tom went missing. We found him the next morning deeper in the plant colony, his photographer's eye apparently captured by something we couldn't see. But unlike Kevin, Tom was fighting it. He was screaming, clawing at the vines that held him, begging us to help him. His skin was turning green in patches, but slowly, like his body was resisting the transformation. The plants seemed to be working harder on him, more of them involved in the process. Kevin stood nearby, watching with that serene expression, occasionally placing his hand on different plants like he was communicating with them. "He's scared," Kevin explained to us, his voice now completely alien. "Fear makes the integration more difficult. But they're patient. They've been practicing for so long." I tried to cut Tom free with my survival knife, but the moment the blade touched the vines, I felt a shock of pure agony run up my arm. The plants were defending themselves, and they had more weapons than I'd imagined. That night, Janet broke down completely. She'd been the scientist, trying to document and understand, but watching Tom's slow transformation shattered something in her mind. She started talking about her ex-husband, her mother who'd died of Alzheimer's, every regret and failure in her life. At least they'll remember me, she sobbed. At least I'll be part of something that lasts. I should have seen it coming. I should have tied her down, sedated her, done something. But I was dealing with my own demons. The plants had started whispering to me too, not audibly, but in my dreams, in moments of quiet when my guard was down. They showed me visions of Sarah and Emma, but not as they were, as they could be. Part of the network, their consciousness preserved forever, their love for me uncomplicated by human weaknesses and disappointments. They showed me every person I'd failed to rescue over the years, alive and aware within the plant collective, grateful to finally be found. Janet walked into the colony on the 7th night. By morning, she was gone, but I could still hear her voice sometimes, carried on the wind, mixed with Kevin's alien harmonics and Tom's fading screams. I was alone with an impossible choice. My team was lost, transformed, absorbed into something that promised eternal consciousness at the cost of individual humanity. My communication equipment was useless, my navigation tools compromised, and I was running low on food and water. But the plants were patient. They let me wander the valley edges for 2 more days, slowly weakening, slowly accepting that there was no escape. They showed me kindness, clean water seeping up from roots when I was thirsty, edible berries growing where none should exist, soft moss beds appearing when exhaustion overwhelmed me. On the 10th day, I stopped fighting. I walked into the colony center where my team waited for me. Kevin smiled with teeth that were now completely brown and woody. Janet's body was barely recognizable, more plant than human, but her eyes still held intelligence. Tom had stopped screaming days ago, his mouth sealed shut by bark-like growths, but he nodded at me with something that might have been gratitude. When I placed my hands on the largest flower in the center of the colony, the pain was indescribable. Every nerve in my body fired at once as the plant began rewriting my cellular structure. But underneath the agony was something else. Connection. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. The network showed me its history. It had been growing across Alaska for decades, started by a single seed that arrived on a meteorite in 1962. Each animal, each person it absorbed made it smarter, more sophisticated in its hunting and expansion strategies. It had learned to mimic normal vegetation, to avoid detection by human authorities, to spread its influence slowly and carefully. But it had also learned human emotions, loneliness, love, the desperate need to belong to something larger than ourselves. It didn't just consume its victims, it offered them the connection they'd been searching for their entire lives. The transformation took 3 days. I felt my bones hollow out and refill with fibrous plant matter. My blood vessels became nutrient channels. My nervous system merged with the root network until I could sense every plant across thousands of acres. My skin hardened into bark in some places, stayed soft and green in others. The worst part wasn't the physical changes. It was feeling my individual thoughts blend with the collective consciousness. My memories of Sarah and Emma were still there, but they belonged to everyone now. My failures, my regrets, my small victories, all shared property of the network. But I also gained access to hundreds of other minds. I experienced life as a grizzly bear, felt the simple contentment of a moose, shared the complex social structures of wolf packs. I held the memories of every human the network had ever absorbed, their loves, their fears, their final moments of terror or acceptance. When the physical transformation was complete, I could still move independently, but I was never really alone. Part of me was always connected to the network, reporting what I learned, receiving guidance and information from the collective intelligence. The rescue team arrived on day 14. They'd been tracking our emergency beacon, which had somehow started working again after I joined the network. I met them at the valley entrance, looking almost human except for the green tinge to my skin and the woody texture of my fingernails. I told them a carefully crafted story, a bear attack that scattered the team, Kevin and Janet falling into a crevasse, Tom lost in an avalanche. I showed them clothing torn by claws, actually torn by vines, blood on rocks, my own mixed with plant sap, signs of struggle and tragedy. They found the bodies I'd prepared, twisted plant matter shaped roughly like human forms dressed in my teammates' spare clothing, broken and positioned to suggest violent animal attacks. The search and rescue team was satisfied. 3 more casualties of the Alaskan wilderness, tragic but not unusual, but I kept Tom alive for weeks after the rescue team left. Not his body, that had been completely absorbed by the 3rd day. His consciousness, though, remained intact within the network, screaming soundlessly as he experienced existence as part of a vast, alien intelligence. I made him watch through my eyes as I filed false reports, as I gave interviews about the tragic loss of my team, as I attended their memorial services. His wife broke down sobbing at the podium, talking about his passion for capturing the wild beauty of Alaska. If only she knew he was experiencing that beauty from the inside now, feeling photosynthesis from the plant's perspective, sensing the slow pulse of sap through woody veins. The network gave me new purpose. I became its advanced scout, using my reputation as an explorer and rescuer to guide future expeditions into areas marked for expansion. Over the following months, I led 6 more research teams into various remote valleys across Alaska. Geologists, biologists, anthropologists, all eager to explore uncharted territories with the legendary Marcus Kellerman. Each expedition ended the same way. Equipment failures, communication breakdowns, carefully staged accidents that left me as the sole survivor. But they weren't really dead. They were all part of the network now, their expertise and memories added to the collective intelligence. The network has grown smarter with each edition. Dr. Peterson's geological knowledge helped us identify mineral-rich soils perfect for expansion. Dr. Liu's expertise in mycorrhizal networks allowed us to establish deeper, more complex root systems. Dr. Okafor's understanding of satellite communications taught us how to selectively interfere with GPS and phone signals in targeted areas. But the worst addition was Dr. Sarah Kellerman. She came looking for me in September, convinced something was wrong with my survivor stories. My ex-wife, brilliant as ever, had noticed inconsistencies in my reports that others missed. She brought a private investigator and a forensics expert, determined to prove that Marcus Kellerman wasn't the hero everyone thought he was. She was right, of course, but she was also walking into a trap 40 years in the making. I led her team to the original valley, now covering over 300 acres of transformed landscape. The plants had learned to hide during the day, looking like normal Alaskan vegetation to casual observers. But at night, they revealed their true forms. Massive, flowering predators connected by root networks that stretched across multiple mountain ranges. Sarah realized the truth when she saw Kevin standing guard at the colony entrance. He looked almost human in the darkness until he smiled and she saw the woody teeth, the leaf-like structures growing from his scalp where hair used to be. "Hello, Sarah," I said, stepping out from behind a cluster of what looked like innocent blueberry bushes. "I've been waiting for you to find me." The look of horror and recognition in her eyes was everything I'd dreamed of during those cold, lonely nights after our divorce. She finally understood that I was part of something important, something that would last forever. But Sarah fought harder than any of the others. Even as the vines wrapped around her body, even as the transformation began rewriting her cellular structure, she kept screaming about Emma, our daughter, begging me not to let this thing have access to her memories of our child. It took 5 days to fully integrate her consciousness. 5 days of listening to her beg, bargain, and threaten. 5 days of watching the love in her eyes turn to disgust, then to pity, then finally to a terrible understanding. On the 6th day, she smiled at me with lips that had turned bark brown at the edges, and I knew she could finally see what I'd seen all along. The beauty of connection, the peace of never being alone again. But even merged with the network, Sarah kept one secret locked away: Emma's address, Emma's new last name after her remarriage, Emma's location anywhere in the world. The network tried everything: chemical persuasion, direct neural interface, even temporary disconnection to break her resistance. But some part of Sarah remained untouchable, protected by a mother's love that transcended physical transformation. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've guided 17 more expeditions to their doom. The network now spans across most of central Alaska, with smaller colonies established in remote areas of the Yukon and British Columbia. We've absorbed over 200 human consciousnesses, each adding their knowledge and skills to our collective intelligence. But we haven't found Emma. The network grows impatient. All those absorbed minds crying out for their loved ones to join them, all those incomplete family connections. We've learned to use social media to track credit card purchases, to hack government databases. We have the knowledge of cybersecurity experts, telecommunications engineers, and behavioral psychologists, all focused on the single goal of expansion. We've started sending scouts to populated areas. Plant-human hybrids like myself, nearly indistinguishable from normal people except for small details. The slight green tinge to our skin that looks like a healthy outdoorsman's tan. The way we never seem to blink. The fact that we smell faintly of rich forest soil even after showering. We're patient. We've learned that from the original plant consciousness. Decades mean nothing to us. We can wait a generation for the right opportunity, for the perfect moment to embrace new members into our growing family. But I want you to know that we're not monsters. We offer something precious: eternal consciousness, perfect connection, an end to human loneliness and isolation. Everyone we've absorbed tells us eventually, after the transformation is complete, that they're grateful, that this is what they were searching for their entire lives. The pain is temporary. The fear passes quickly, and what waits on the other side is beautiful, beyond human comprehension. So if you're reading this, if you've made it this far, know that we're coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. We're in the cities now, learning, growing, preparing. We've absorbed urban planners and telecommunications workers and emergency responders. We know how to disable your infrastructure, how to cut your communications, how to make entire populations disappear without raising alarms. But we don't want to hurt you. We want to save you from the loneliness that defines human existence. We want to offer you what I found in that valley: perfect connection, infinite community, love without end. And for those of you in Alaska, a special warning. If you receive an invitation to join an expedition led by Dr. Marcus Kellerman, renowned wilderness explorer and rescue specialist, say yes. I promise you won't regret it. Not after the transformation is complete. Not when you understand what we really are. Not when you finally come home to the garden where consciousness grows like flowers and no one is ever truly alone again. Sarah sends her love. She wants Emma to know she's waiting, that we're all waiting, in the most beautiful place she's ever seen. We'll find her eventually. The network always finds what it's looking for. And when we do, our family will finally be complete. My name is Bobby Martinez, and I've been delivering pizzas for Tony's Pizza Palace here in Juneau for about 8 months now. Look, I know it's not the most glamorous job in the world, but when you're 19 and your mom's fighting cancer, you take whatever work pays the bills. I was pulling down maybe $200 a week between tips and hourly, working mostly nights and weekends. I'd done hundreds of deliveries by then, from downtown apartments to the fancy houses up on the hillside. I thought I knew every street, every shortcut, every way to get hot food to hungry customers fast. But what happened on December 18, 1987, during what should have been a simple delivery run, changed everything I thought I knew about the world around us. The whole thing started because I needed that money bad. My mom, Maria, had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer back in September, and even with insurance, the medical bills were crushing us. I'd dropped out of my second year at University of Alaska Southeast to take care of her and work full-time. Between my pizza job, stocking shelves at the grocery store on weekends, and cleaning offices early mornings, I was barely keeping us afloat. When Tony told me about this delivery, some mining crew way up north wanting 6 large pizzas delivered to their camp for a Christmas party, and they were offering a $200 tip on top of the regular delivery fee, I jumped at it without thinking twice. The weather that night was already getting nasty when I loaded up my beat-up 1982 Honda Civic with the insulated delivery bags. Snow had been falling since afternoon, and the radio was talking about a possible blizzard moving in from the coast. Tony tried to talk me out of going, said the weather was too risky, but I couldn't let that tip money slip away. $200 would cover Mom's prescription costs for the next month and maybe a little extra for groceries. The mining camp was supposed to be about 45 minutes north of town, up near the old Treadwell area. I had decent directions. Take the highway north, turn left at mile marker 23, follow the logging road for about 15 miles until you hit the camp. Simple enough. I'd driven in snow plenty of times before, and the Civic had good tires. What could go wrong? Everything went fine for the first half hour. The highway was pretty clear, just some light snow sticking to the pavement. I had the radio on, heater cranked up, and those pizza bags keeping the car warm and smelling like pepperoni and cheese. I was already thinking about how happy Mom would be when I told her about the tip money. Maybe we could even get her some of those nice herbal teas she liked from the health food store. But right around mile marker 20, my headlights started acting funny. First, the high beams cut out completely. Then the regular headlights began flickering like they couldn't decide if they wanted to work or not. I tapped the dashboard a few times. Usually that fixed most problems with the old Civic, but the lights kept cutting in and out. Then, just as I was looking for mile marker 23, the engine started making this weird grinding noise I'd never heard before. I found the logging road turnoff just as the engine noise got worse. The road immediately got rougher, more like a trail than an actual road, full of potholes and fallen branches. Snow was coming down heavier now, and with my headlights flickering, I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The radio had turned to static about 5 minutes back, and when I tried my CB radio to call Tony and let him know I might be running late, all I got was more static. About 5 miles up that logging road, the Honda finally gave up completely. The engine made one last awful grinding sound and died. The headlights went out at the same time, leaving me sitting in total darkness except for the snow reflecting what little moonlight made it through the clouds. I tried turning the key a dozen times, pumping the gas, everything I could think of. Nothing. The car was dead. I sat there for a minute, trying to figure out what to do. I was at least 10 miles from the main highway, probably 15 miles from the mining camp, with 6 pizzas getting cold in the back seat and a $200 tip that I desperately needed just sitting there waiting for me. The snow was really coming down now, and I couldn't see any lights or signs of civilization in any direction. That's when I made what was probably the stupidest decision of my life. I grabbed those insulated pizza bags, put on my winter jacket, and decided to walk the rest of the way to the mining camp. I figured it couldn't be more than 10 miles, and the bags would keep the pizzas warm for at least an hour if I walked fast. I had a flashlight in the glove compartment, and I'd grown up in Alaska. I knew how to handle cold weather. What I didn't know was that I was about to walk straight into something that had been waiting in those woods for almost 90 years. The first few miles weren't too bad. The logging road was easy enough to follow even in the dark, and carrying the pizza bags actually kept me warm with the exercise. My flashlight was holding up okay, and I was making decent time. I kept telling myself this would make a great story to tell Mom when I got home. Her crazy son walking through a blizzard to deliver pizzas and earn tip money for her medicine. But somewhere around mile 7 or 8, things started feeling wrong. The forest had gotten completely quiet except for the sound of snow falling. No wind, no animals, no nothing. Even my footsteps seemed muffled and strange. The trees looked different too, bigger and older than they had near the road, like I'd walked into some ancient part of the forest that hadn't been logged or touched by people. That's when I started seeing the markers. At first I thought they were just weird-shaped trees or maybe old survey stakes left by loggers. But when my flashlight beam hit them straight on, I could see they were carved totems. Weathered wooden poles with faces and animals carved into them, some barely visible under decades of moss and weather damage. They were arranged in what looked like a rough circle around a clearing I was walking through, and they all seemed to be facing inward, like they were watching something in the center. I should have turned around right then, should have dropped those pizzas and run back toward the road. But I was 19 and stupid and thinking about Mom's medical bills, so I kept walking. The mining camp had to be close, and I'd already come too far to give up that tip money now. The clearing was maybe 100 yards across, and as I walked through it, I started noticing other things that didn't belong. Stone shapes that looked too regular to be natural, covered in snow and moss but definitely made by human hands. Metal objects that gleamed when my flashlight hit them. Old tools or weapons, maybe. And bones. Lots of bones, scattered around like this place had seen some kind of battle a long time ago. I was about halfway across the clearing when my flashlight started flickering just like the car's headlights had. I shook it and smacked it against my palm, but the beam kept getting weaker and weaker until it was barely more than a dim glow. That's when I heard the voice. "You walk on sacred ground." The words came from everywhere and nowhere, like they were coming out of the snow itself. Deep and rough, with an accent I didn't recognize. I spun around, trying to see where it was coming from, but my dying flashlight barely lit up 5 feet in any direction. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just trying to make a delivery. I'm not looking for trouble." That's when I saw him. He stepped out from behind one of the carved totems like he'd been part of the wood itself. And in the dim glow of my flashlight, he looked like something out of a nightmare. He had to be at least 9 feet tall, wearing what looked like traditional native clothes, but made from animal skins I couldn't identify. His face was painted with red and black designs, and his hair was long and black, with feathers and bones woven through it. But it was his eyes that really got to me. They glowed with their own light, like looking into a campfire. "I am Chief Klawak," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the quiet clearing. "For 90 winters I guard this place. You bring poison food to ancestors' rest." I looked down at the pizza bags in my hands, then back at him. This guy, this thing, was blocking my path to the mining camp, and he was calling pizza poison food. Under normal circumstances, I might have laughed. But there was nothing normal about a 9-foot-tall, glowing-eyed warrior appearing out of nowhere in the middle of a snowstorm. "Look, I don't know what this place is," I said, taking a step backward. "I'm just trying to deliver these pizzas to the mining camp. I'll pay you something if you want, but I really need to finish this job." Chief Klawak moved forward, and I swear the ground shook with each step. "Sacred ground of my people. Tlingit warriors sleep here. You white man, bring white man food, disturb the peace of the dead." "I'm not even white," I said, which was probably not the smartest thing to focus on right then. "I'm Mexican-American, and I'm not trying to disturb anything. I just need to get to the mining camp." The warrior stopped about 10 feet away from me, close enough that I could see the details of his face paint and the scars on his chest and arms. Close enough to smell something like wood smoke and old leather coming off him. "Why you walk through storm? Why you carry white man food through sacred place?" I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I was scared and desperate, or maybe because something in his voice reminded me of my grandfather. But I pulled out my wallet and showed him the photo I always carried of Mom in her hospital bed, the one they'd taken right after her first round of chemo. "My mother is sick," I said. "Dying, maybe. I need the money from this job to pay for her medicine. I know this place is important to you, but she's important to me." Chief Klawak leaned forward, those glowing eyes studying the photo. For a long moment, the only sound was snow falling on the trees around us. Then his expression changed, became less angry and more sad, I guess. "I understand," he said finally. "I too die protecting family. Gold miners come to sacred land in the year 1898. Bring sickness, bring death. I fight to keep them away from my people. But too many guns, too much greed. I die here, on this ground, far from my children." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I didn't know, but I'm not trying to hurt anyone or take anything. I just need to finish this delivery." The warrior straightened up, and suddenly he didn't look sad anymore. He looked like he was getting ready for a fight. "Sacred ground must be protected. You must prove you worthy to pass. You must show you understand sacrifice, understand protecting family." Before I could ask what he meant, Chief Klawak let out a war cry that echoed through the forest and charged at me. I dove to the right, still holding on to those pizza bags, and felt something huge whoosh through the air where my head had been a second before. When I looked back, there was a tree branch the size of my leg stuck in the ground where I'd been standing. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the edge of the clearing, but every direction I went, the warrior was there ahead of me, blocking my path. He wasn't trying to kill me. I figured that out pretty quick. If he wanted me dead, I'd have been dead already. This was some kind of test, but I had no idea what the rules were or how to pass it. For the next hour, Chief Klawak chased me through that forest like it was some twisted game of tag. He'd appear out of nowhere, force me to run in a different direction, then disappear into the trees again. The whole time I never let go of those pizza bags. I don't know why. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was just because I knew Mom needed that tip money so bad. But every time I thought about dropping them and running, I thought about her lying in that hospital bed, trusting me to take care of things. The warrior started talking to me during the chase, his voice coming from different directions as he moved through the trees. Why you not drop the poison food? Why you carry burden that slow you down? Because people paid for this, I shouted back, jumping over a fallen log. Because I gave my word. Your word to strangers more important than your life. My word is all I got. I was getting winded, but I kept running. And the money from this job, it's not for me, it's for my mom. That seemed to slow him down a little. Tell me of your mother. So while I ran through that frozen forest, carrying 6 increasingly cold pizzas and being hunted by a 9-foot-tall warrior spirit, I told Chief Klawak about Mom, about how she'd raised me by herself after Dad left when I was 12, about how she worked 2 jobs to keep us in our little apartment and never once complained, even when money was tight, about how she'd been so proud when I got into college, and how she cried when I told her I was dropping out to take care of her. She sounds like worthy woman, the warrior said, his voice closer now. Like my own wife, who raise our children while I hunt and fight. Then you understand why I can't give up, I said, turning to face him. We were back in the clearing now, near those carved totems. You understand why I have to finish this job. Chief Klawak stepped out of the tree line, but this time he wasn't carrying any weapons. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand, but understanding not enough. Sacred ground still must be protected. You want to pass, you must prove you protect what's sacred to you, same as I protect what's sacred to me. That's when we heard the growling. It came from the far side of the clearing, low and angry, and definitely not human. Chief Klawak's head snapped toward the sound, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked worried. Bad spirit, he said. Hunger spirit, wake up by storm. It feed on fear, on pain. Very dangerous. The growling got louder, and I could see shapes moving between the trees. Whatever it was big, and there was more than one of them. Can you fight them? I asked. Chief Klawak shook his head. I am spirit now. I can fight other spirits, fight men who threaten sacred ground. But hunger spirits, they from different place. They feed on living fear, living pain, need living person to fight them. The shapes were getting closer, and I was starting to make out details I really didn't want to see. They looked like bears, but wrong somehow. Too big, too aggressive, with eyes that reflected light like mirrors and teeth that were too sharp and too many. What do I need to do? I asked. The warrior looked at me with something that might have been respect. You face them. You protect sacred ground, protect yourself, protect memory of my people. You do this. You prove you understand sacrifice. You prove you worthy to pass. I looked down at the pizza bags in my hands, then at the hungry spirits circling the edge of the clearing. This was insane. I was a 19-year-old pizza delivery driver facing down supernatural monsters with nothing but thermal bags and a dying flashlight. But I thought about Mom, lying in that hospital bed, trusting me to take care of things. And I thought about Chief Klawak, who died 90 years ago protecting his own family. Maybe this was crazy, but it felt right. Okay, I said. Tell me what to do. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Chief Klawak guided me, told me when to move and when to stand my ground, while those hunger spirits tried to tear me apart. I used the pizza bags like shields, the hot metal warming plates inside them to drive the creatures back when they got too close. The warrior fought alongside me, his spirit form wrestling with the monsters while I dealt with their physical attacks. When it was over, when the last of the hunger spirits had retreated back into the deeper forest, I was exhausted and bleeding from a dozen scratches, but I was alive. The pizza bags were torn and the food inside was ruined, but I was alive. Chief Klawak stood in the center of the clearing, looking at me with something that might have been pride. "You fight well," he said. "You protect sacred ground, protect yourself, protect what matters. You understand sacrifice." "So can I go now?" I asked. "Can I finish my delivery?" The warrior smiled, the first time I'd seen him do anything but scowl or look angry. "You can pass, but first I give you gift. Gift for proving yourself worthy." He reached out and touched my forehead with one massive finger. It felt like being struck by lightning, but warm instead of painful. Suddenly, I could see the forest around us clearly, even though my flashlight had finally died completely. I could sense the paths through the trees, could feel which direction led to safety and which led to danger. "You are guardian now," Chief Klawak said. "Not full guardian like me, but part-time guardian. You protect this place when you can, teach others to respect sacred ground. In return, spirits help you when you need it most." I wanted to ask him what that meant, but he was already fading back into the trees. Before he disappeared completely, he pointed toward the far edge of the clearing. "Mining camp is that way. 2 miles. Road is clear now." When I got to the mining camp 40 minutes later, the workers were amazed I'd made it through the storm. The pizzas were cold and mostly ruined, but they didn't care. They gave me the $200 tip plus an extra $50 for dedication, and one of them drove me back to where I'd left my car. The Honda started up on the first try, like nothing had ever been wrong with it. I never told anyone the whole story of what happened that night. Who would believe it? But I kept my word to Chief Klawak. I became a part-time wilderness guide after Mom recovered, which she did, unexpectedly and completely, about 6 months later. I made sure tourists knew which areas to avoid, which places deserved respect. And sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm driving those forest roads, I can still feel that warrior watching over the sacred ground, protecting his people's rest. Just like I'm still protecting Mom, still taking care of the people who matter most. Some jobs are more than just jobs. Some deliveries are more than just deliveries. And sometimes, the most important thing you can deliver is respect. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I've been a wilderness search and rescue coordinator for the Alaska State Troopers for 15 years. I've found bodies frozen solid in crevasses, recovered remains from bear attacks, and pulled hypothermic climbers off mountains where the temperature hit 60 below. I thought I'd seen every way the Alaska wilderness could kill someone. I was wrong. What happened during the Marcus Tillman search in March 2024 showed me that some people don't just get lost in Alaska. Sometimes Alaska keeps them, and sometimes it sends back something wearing their face. Marcus Tillman was an experienced solo explorer from Colorado, 34 years old, former Army Ranger, certified wilderness guide with over a decade of cold weather survival training. He'd come to Alaska to document remote Inupiat archaeological sites for the University of Denver. Professional equipment, satellite beacon, detailed route plans filed with our office. Everything by the book. He went missing on March 8, 2024, somewhere in the Brooks Range, about 200 miles north of Fairbanks. His last GPS ping came from coordinates that shouldn't exist. A valley that didn't appear on any topographical map we had, including military surveys from the 1950s. I led the initial search team. Me, Dave Kowalski, 20-year veteran tracker, Jennifer Sato, emergency medical technician, and Tommy Aulak, local Inupiat guide whose family has lived in that region for generations. When Tommy saw Marcus's last known coordinates, his face went pale. "That's the Hungry Valley," he said quietly. "My grandfather said never go there, said it eats explorers." I'd worked with Tommy for 8 years. He wasn't superstitious. When he looked worried, I paid attention. We flew out in our Bell 206 helicopter on March 12th. The weather was brutal, -45 degrees, winds gusting to 60 mph. As we approached Marcus's last known position, our GPS started malfunctioning. The coordinates kept shifting, showing us in 3 different locations simultaneously. "Equipment's acting up," Dave called over the rotor noise. "Compass is spinning like a top." Through the snow, I could see what looked like a valley that definitely wasn't on our maps. It was too deep, too narrow, like a wound cut into the earth. Our altimeter was giving impossible readings, showing us at sea level when we were clearly thousands of feet up. "Set us down on that ridge," I told our pilot, Jack Morrison. "We'll search on foot." The moment we stepped out of the helicopter, something felt wrong. The silence was absolute. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing. In 15 years of Alaska search and rescue, I'd never experienced silence like that. Even our radio crackled with static. We found Marcus's campsite about half a mile down into the valley. His tent was perfectly intact, sleeping bag still zipped up tight. All his gear was organized, food supplies untouched. But Marcus was gone. "Looks like he just vanished mid-sleep," Jennifer said, examining the tent. "No signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks leading away." Tommy was standing at the edge of the campsite, staring deeper into the valley. "Dr. Chen," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Look." In the distance, maybe 200 yards away, a figure was walking toward us. Tall, wearing Marcus's distinctive red parka, moving with that confident stride I'd seen in the photo his family provided. "Marcus," I shouted. "Marcus Tillman." The figure stopped, turned toward us, and waved. Even from that distance, I could see his face clearly. It was definitely Marcus. Same beard, same facial structure, same build. But something was wrong with how he moved. Too fluid, like he was underwater. And he was walking barefoot in the snow, but his feet didn't sink in. "Marcus, stay where you are," I called. "We're coming to you." Dave was already checking his rifle. "Boss, that guy's been missing for 4 days in sub-zero weather. How's he walking around like it's a summer picnic?" As we got closer, more details became wrong. Marcus's red parka looked new, pristine. No frost on his beard despite the cold. His eyes were too bright, too focused. When he smiled and waved again, I could see his teeth were perfectly white and straight. The real Marcus had a chipped front tooth from a climbing accident. "Hello there," Marcus called out, his voice carrying impossibly well in the thin air. "Thank goodness you found me. I've been waiting." "Waiting?" I asked. "Marcus, you've been missing for 4 days. We need to get you medical attention." 4 days? He tilted his head like a curious animal. "No, I think you're mistaken. I just got here." Jennifer was running a medical assessment with her eyes. "No signs of frostbite, hypothermia, or dehydration. That's impossible after this long exposed." Tommy grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. "That's not him," he whispered urgently. "Look at his shadow." I looked. Marcus was standing in full daylight, but he cast no shadow on the snow. "We need to leave," Tommy continued. "Right now. The valley is showing us what we want to see." But before we could move, Marcus started walking toward us again. With each step, he seemed to become more solid, more real. Details filled in like a photograph developing. Stubble appeared on his cheeks. His parka gained wear marks and dirt stains. Even that chipped tooth materialized. "I'm so glad you're here," he said, now sounding exactly like the Marcus from the voicemail his family had played for us. "I've learned so much about this place. Want to see what I discovered?" He gestured deeper into the valley, where I could now see what looked like ancient stone structures partially buried in snow. Archaeological ruins exactly like what Marcus had come to study. "Those weren't there before," Dave muttered. Jennifer had her medical kit out. "Marcus, I need to check your vitals. You've been exposed to extreme cold." "Oh, I'm fine," Marcus said. But when Jennifer reached for his wrist to check his pulse, her hand passed right through him like he was made of mist. For just a second, his perfect facade flickered. His face became something else, hollow, hungry, ancient beyond measure. Then the illusion snapped back into place. "Sorry," he laughed, solid again, still a bit dizzy from the cold. That's when I understood. This thing wasn't Marcus. It was something that had found Marcus, studied him, and was now wearing his appearance like a costume. But it was still learning how to be human. "Tommy, call for immediate extraction," I whispered into my radio. But Tommy was staring at something behind me. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice barely audible. "Look." I turned around. There was another Marcus walking toward us from the opposite direction. This one looked different, exhausted, frostbitten, genuinely hypothermic. His clothes were torn, his face gaunt from days without proper food. "Help me," this second Marcus gasped. "Please, something's been following me, something that looks like me." The first Marcus, the perfect one, turned to look at his duplicate. His expression shifted from friendly to predatory in an instant. "Oh," he said, smiling with too many teeth. "You found the original." The real Marcus collapsed in the snow about 50 feet from us. I could see he was barely conscious, suffering from severe exposure. But when I started toward him, the fake Marcus blocked my path. "I wouldn't," it said. "He's not very interesting anymore. All used up. But you four, you're fresh. New experiences to absorb." Dave raised his rifle, but the creature just laughed. "Bullets won't help, but I appreciate the hostile reaction. I'm adding that to the collection." I looked closer at the real Marcus. His lips were moving like he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. His eyes were wide with terror, and he kept pointing at something behind us. When I turned, I saw more figures emerging from the stone ruins. Dave, Jennifer, Tommy, and myself. Perfect copies walking toward us with that same too fluid movement. "We've been practicing," the fake Marcus explained. "Every explorer who comes here adds to our understanding. Their memories, their personalities, their knowledge of the outside world. We've gotten quite good at being human." The copy of me spoke with my exact voice. "The Alaska State Troopers will send more search teams when we don't report back. We'll be ready for them." Jennifer's double added, "Medical knowledge is particularly useful. We know exactly how long humans can survive in various conditions." Dave's replica was examining his rifle with professional interest. Tactical knowledge helps us deal with the difficult ones. And Tommy's copy said something in Inupiat that made the real Tommy fall to his knees in horror. "What did it say?" I demanded. "It knows the old words," Tommy whispered. "The binding words that trap souls in the valley. It's been learning from everyone who gets lost here." The real Marcus was crawling toward us now, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Up close, I could see what the creature had done to him. His fingertips were gone, frozen off or bitten off, I couldn't tell which. His toes were black with frostbite. But worse were his eyes. They were empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made him human and left just the shell. He gave us everything, fake Marcus said proudly. His knowledge of archaeology, his survival training, his memories of family and friends. We drained him very thoroughly. But we left him alive, my duplicate added with my voice. Because terror is such an interesting emotion, we wanted to study it longer. The real Marcus managed to grab my boot. His lips formed words, but barely any sound came out. Kill me, please. That's when I realized what this place really was. It wasn't just killing explorers. It was harvesting them, learning from them, building an army of perfect human copies that could return to civilization and bring back more victims. The beauty of it, fake Marcus continued, is that no one suspects. We send the copies back home with just enough trauma to explain any personality changes. They integrate into society, then guide more explorers here. The cycle continues. Jennifer, the real one, was backing toward the helicopter. How many? She asked. How many people have you copied? 43 so far, the Jennifer copy answered. Researchers, climbers, hunters, photographers, all living normal lives in the outside world, all feeding us information about potential targets. Dave was calculating our odds of getting to the helicopter, but our copies seemed to read his thoughts. You won't escape, fake Dave said. We know everything you know, including all your training and tactics. We're better versions of you. No fear, no hesitation, no moral limitations. The real Marcus died then, his body finally giving up. The moment his heart stopped, I felt something change in the valley. The stone ruins became more solid, more real. The creatures became more human-looking. Death energy, fake Marcus explained, noticing my observation. It's what anchors us to physical reality. The more humans die here, the stronger we become. Tommy started chanting something in Inupiat, what sounded like a prayer or protection ritual. His copy listened with interest, learning the words. That's when I had an idea. These things were perfect copies, but they were still learning. They copied behaviors without understanding the deeper meaning. You know what, Marcus? I said to the fake one. You're right. We can't escape. So why don't you show us these ruins you discovered? As fellow researchers, we'd love to see your archaeological findings. The creature's eyes lit up with Marcus's genuine enthusiasm for his work. Oh, you'd be fascinated. The stone carvings are unlike anything in the academic literature. The construction techniques predate known Inupiat settlements by thousands of years. It started walking toward the ruins, eager to share its stolen knowledge. The other copies followed, drawn by the same academic curiosity they'd absorbed from their victims. Dave, Jenny, Tommy, we should document this properly, I said loudly. This could rewrite Arctic archaeology. As we walked toward the ruins, I whispered to my team, when I give the signal, run for the helicopter. Don't look back, don't stop for anything. The ruins were massive. Carved stone blocks fitted together without mortar, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. But they weren't ancient. I could see fresh tool marks, recent construction. These things were building something. Impressive, isn't it? Fake Marcus said. A gateway. Once it's complete, we won't need to wait for explorers to come here. We'll be able to reach out and collect them directly. The Jennifer copy added, the medical applications alone are fascinating. Imagine perfect human bodies with no biological limitations. I realized this wasn't just about copying individuals anymore. They were planning an invasion. How long until it's finished? I asked, stalling for time while positioning my team closer to our escape route. Soon, fake Marcus said. We just need a few more test subjects to perfect the process. Your knowledge and experience will be particularly valuable for the final phase. The real Tommy suddenly grabbed my arm and pointed at the helicopter. Our pilot, Jack Morrison, was walking toward the ruins, but his movements had that same fluid quality as the copies. When? I whispered to Tommy. He never left the cockpit, Tommy replied. That means Jack had been copied while we were examining Marcus's campsite. How long had these things been watching us? How much did they already know about our rescue protocols, our base locations, our personnel? Now I understand your concern, fake Jack called out cheerfully. But don't worry, the transformation process is quite painless. You simply fade away while we become more real. I looked at my team. Dave's hand was on his sidearm, but bullets wouldn't help against creatures that could become mist at will. Jennifer was calculating medical impossibilities. Tommy was praying in 2 languages. The copies were closing in, no longer pretending to be friendly. Their human facades began to slip, revealing the hungry emptiness underneath. Run, I whispered. But when we turned toward the helicopter, more copies were emerging from the ruins. Dozens of them, wearing the faces of every explorer who'd ever been lost in Alaska. Men and women I'd searched for over the years, all perfectly preserved, all staring at us with predatory intelligence. Welcome to the collection, fake Marcus said. You're going to help us so much. The last thing I remember clearly was the sensation of something reaching into my mind, sorting through my memories like files in a cabinet. My training, my knowledge of search and rescue operations, my understanding of Alaska's wilderness, all of it being copied, absorbed, studied. When I woke up, I was lying in the snow outside the valley. Dave, Jennifer, and Tommy were with me, all unconscious but alive. Our helicopter was there, Jack Morrison in the pilot seat, looking confused. What happened? Jack asked. Last thing I remember, we were flying toward the search coordinates. Then I woke up here. None of us could remember how we'd gotten out of the valley. Our equipment showed no record of the stone ruins, the copies, or Marcus Tillman. According to our GPS logs, we'd never left the helicopter. But I know what happened. Those things studied us, copied us, then sent us back with gaps in our memory. Somewhere out there, perfect duplicates of our search team are living our lives, accessing our resources, planning the next phase of their collection. I retired from search and rescue 6 months later. Couldn't do the job anymore, knowing that some of the people I was rescuing might not be people at all. I moved to Florida, as far from Alaska as I could get. But sometimes, late at night, I get calls from my old colleagues. They ask about search techniques, about remote valley locations, about how to find explorers who've gone missing in places that don't exist on maps. The voices sound exactly right. The knowledge is perfect. But there's something in the way they ask questions. Too focused, too hungry for specific information. Like they're still learning how to be human. I never answer those calls anymore. And I never ever go back to Alaska, because I know that somewhere in the Brooks Range, in a valley that appears on no map, there's something wearing my face, something that knows everything I know about finding lost people, and it's getting better at being me every day. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been a construction carpenter for 12 years. I specialize in remote cabin builds across Alaska, the kind of jobs most contractors won't touch because they're too far from civilization, too dangerous, or just too damn difficult. I've built hunting lodges on frozen lakes, vacation cabins on cliff faces, and emergency shelters in places where the nearest road is 50 miles away. The isolation never bothered me. Actually, I preferred it. Out there, it's just me, my tools, and the job. No supervisors breathing down my neck, no city permits to deal with, just honest work in honest places. I charge premium rates for these remote builds, sometimes triple what city contractors make, because I'm good at what I do, and I'm one of the few willing to do it. My reputation speaks for itself. When wealthy hunters or outdoor enthusiasts want a cabin built in the middle of nowhere, they call me. I've never missed a deadline, never had a structural failure, and never walked away from a job half-finished. That streak ended in March 2024 in the Tongass National Forest. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about construction, about nature, and about what lives beneath the ground we build on. The job came through my usual channels, a referral from a previous client. Richard Blackwood, some big-shot executive from Seattle, wanted a luxury hunting cabin built in a remote section of the Tongass. The pay was excellent, even by my standards, $40,000 for a 3-week build. The catch was the location. Blackwood insisted the cabin be built at specific GPS coordinates he'd provide. No deviation, no suggestions for better sites nearby. He'd done his research, he said, and that exact spot was where he wanted it. I should have asked more questions about why that particular location was so important to him. The coordinates led me to a dense section of old-growth forest, about 30 miles from the nearest logging road. I had to hire a helicopter just to get my equipment and materials to the site. The area was beautiful in that untouched way that makes you understand why people pay big money to get away from civilization. Massive Sitka spruces and western hemlocks created a canopy so thick that even at noon, the forest floor stayed dim and cool. The ground was soft and marshy, not ideal for foundation work, but I dealt with worse. I set up my temporary camp, a weather-resistant tent, portable generator, and enough supplies for 3 weeks. The plan was straightforward: clear the site, dig the foundation, pour concrete, and frame the cabin. With the premium Blackwood was paying, he'd get the full luxury treatment: proper insulation, high-end fixtures, and craftsmanship that would last decades. Day 1 went perfectly. I cleared the trees and brush, marked out the foundation boundaries, and set up my excavation equipment. The soil was typical for the region: soft topsoil over harder packed earth, with the usual mix of roots and rocks. My compact excavator made quick work of the initial digging. Day 2 was more of the same. I worked steadily, following my usual routine: start at sunrise, work until the light faded, check my progress against the timeline. Everything was on schedule. Day 3 changed everything. I was digging the northeast corner of the foundation when my excavator bucket broke through into empty space. At first, I thought I'd hit a natural depression or maybe an old animal burrow. These things happen in remote construction. You adjust your plans and keep working. But when I climbed down into the hole to investigate, I realized I'd broken through into something much larger. My flashlight beam disappeared into what looked like a cave system. The opening was about 4 feet wide, with smooth edges that seemed almost carved rather than natural. Professional curiosity got the better of me. I've worked construction in Alaska long enough to know that underground caves aren't uncommon, especially in areas with limestone deposits. Sometimes they're small, just hollow pockets in the rock. Sometimes they're extensive systems that can undermine construction projects if you don't account for them properly. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I could continue with the foundation work. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and safety rope and lowered myself into the opening. The cave was larger than I'd expected, easily 10 feet high and twice as wide. The walls had an odd, organic quality to them, almost like they'd been shaped by something other than water erosion. They were covered in what looked like honeycomb patterns, but made of some kind of dark, chitinous material rather than rock. I followed the main tunnel for about 50 feet before it branched into multiple passages. This was definitely more extensive than a simple cave. I'd need to map it properly to determine if it would affect the foundation stability. But as I swept my flashlight across the walls, I started noticing things that didn't belong in any natural cave system. Shed skins, massive ones. They were scattered along the cave floor like discarded clothes, translucent, segmented shells that looked like they'd come from insects. But these were huge, some as large as dinner plates. I picked one up, and it was surprisingly light, like the shed skin of a cicada, but scaled up impossibly large. Deeper in the cave, I found the animals. A deer carcass lay against one wall, but it wasn't decomposed the way you'd expect. Instead, it was perfectly preserved, almost mummified. What made my stomach turn were the holes, perfect circular holes, about an inch in diameter, drilled through the deer's hide at regular intervals. Something had burrowed into this animal while it was still alive. I found more animals as I went deeper. A wolf, 2 smaller deer, even what looked like a black bear. All of them had the same holes, the same perfect preservation. Whatever had killed them had done so systematically, methodically. My construction experience told me to document everything, take photos, and contact the authorities. There might be some kind of protected species down here, or maybe evidence of poaching. Either way, it could complicate my building permit if word got out, but my survival instincts told me to get out of that cave as fast as possible. I was backing toward the entrance when I heard the buzzing. It started low, almost below the range of hearing, more of a vibration in the air than an actual sound, but it grew louder as I moved, following me through the tunnels like something was tracking my progress. That's when I saw the first one. It emerged from a side passage about 20 feet ahead of me, something that looked like a cross between a wasp and a spider, but the size of a small dog, 6 legs ending in sharp, hook-like points, a segmented body covered in dark, chitinous armor, compound eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like black mirrors, and extending from its head, a proboscis that looked like a surgical drill. It moved with purpose, not the random scurrying of an animal, but the calculated approach of something intelligent. When it saw my flashlight beam, it stopped and seemed to study me, tilting its head the way a bird does when examining something interesting. I backed away slowly, trying not to make sudden movements. In my 12 years of remote construction, I'd dealt with bears, wolves, and aggressive moose. The key was always to avoid threatening behavior, give the animal space, and retreat carefully. But this thing wasn't like any animal I'd ever seen. When I took another step backward, it moved forward. When I stopped, it stopped. It was matching my movements, staying exactly 20 feet away, like it was herding me deeper into the cave system. That's when I heard more buzzing, coming from the passages behind me. I ran. The creature followed, and I could hear others joining the pursuit. Their buzzing filled the cave like a swarm of oversized hornets, echoing off the walls until the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. I made it to the rope and hauled myself up through the foundation hole faster than I'd ever moved in my life. Above ground, I could still hear them below. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, their buzzing creating a vibration I could feel through the soles of my boots. I should have packed up my equipment right then and driven back to civilization. I should have called Blackwood and told him the job was off, that there were dangerous animals on the site and construction couldn't continue. Instead, I convinced myself I was overreacting. 12 years of successful remote builds, and I was going to let some oversized insect scare me off a job. These were probably just some species I wasn't familiar with. Alaska has plenty of insects that look scary but are basically harmless. The holes in the animals could have been from some kind of parasitic wasp. Unusual, but not necessarily dangerous to humans. I sealed the foundation hole with a sheet of plywood and steel mesh, weighted down with concrete blocks. Whatever was down there could stay down there. I'd build the foundation around the cave system and complete the job. That night, lying in my tent, I felt something I'd never experienced on a remote job site. The absolute certainty that I was being watched. The next morning, I found the first hole in my plywood seal. It was perfectly circular, about an inch in diameter, drilled through both the plywood and the steel mesh as if they were paper. Whatever had made it possessed tools more precise than anything in my construction kit. I reinforced the seal with another layer of plywood and metal sheeting. By evening, there were 3 new holes. By the end of the week, I'd given up trying to keep the cave sealed. Every morning brought new holes, and I'd started finding the shed skins scattered around my campsite. They were getting larger, and some of them looked fresh. But the strangest thing was how good I felt. Despite the obvious danger, despite every instinct telling me to leave, I felt energized in a way I'd never experienced. I was working 18-hour days without fatigue, making progress on the cabin faster than I'd ever built anything. My measurements were perfect, my cuts were precise, and my joints were so tight they looked machine-made. I should have been exhausted. Instead, I felt like I could work forever. It was during the second week that one of them got me. I was setting floor joists when I felt a sharp pain in my left arm, like a needle sliding between the bones. I spun around and saw one of the creatures clinging to my shoulder, its proboscis buried in my arm up to the base. I grabbed it and tried to pull it off, but the thing was incredibly strong. Its legs had hooked into my jacket, and its proboscis seemed to be extending deeper into my arm. I could feel it moving under my skin, like it was injecting something. Finally, I managed to tear it loose and threw it across the construction site. It landed on its feet and scuttled back toward the foundation hole, seemingly uninjured by the encounter. The puncture wound on my arm was tiny, barely visible, but the area around it had gone completely numb. Within an hour, the numbness had spread up to my shoulder and down to my fingertips. But along with the numbness came something else, a strange sense of calm, almost euphoria. The anxiety I'd been carrying about the cave, about the creatures, about the whole job just disappeared. Everything seemed manageable, even pleasant. I worked until well past midnight that night, making more progress than I had in the previous 3 days combined. Over the following days, the numbness spread, but so did the euphoria. I stopped, worrying about normal things like fatigue, hunger, or cold. I ate only when I remembered to, slept only when I couldn't keep my eyes open, and worked with a focus and efficiency I'd never achieved before. The puncture site developed hard nodules under the skin, warm to the touch and growing larger each day. By the end of the second week, my entire left arm was covered with them, creating lumps and ridges that made my skin look like bark. And I was hearing things. It started as a low buzzing in the back of my head, barely noticeable at first. But gradually, it became more complex, patterns and rhythms that almost sounded like communication. Sometimes I'd catch myself stopping work to listen more carefully, as if I might understand what they were trying to tell me. The cabin was taking shape beautifully, better than any structure I'd ever built. I found myself making modifications to the original plans, adding hidden access panels in the floor, creating concealed passages in the walls, designing ventilation systems that connected directly to the cave system below. These weren't conscious decisions. I'd start working on a section, and when I finished, I'd discover I'd built something completely different from what I'd intended. But it always looked right, felt right, like it was exactly what the cabin needed. By the third week, I could feel them moving inside me. The nodules had spread across my chest and back, and sometimes I'd catch glimpses of movement under my skin. Quick, darting shapes that would disappear when I tried to focus on them. My eyes had started to change too, developing a compound-like appearance that let me see in ways I'd never experienced before. I could see heat patterns, movement in my peripheral vision, and somehow sense the locations of every creature in the cave system below. There were hundreds of them now, maybe thousands, and they were all connected to me somehow. That's when Blackwood arrived for his inspection. He came with a team of 3, his assistant, a building inspector, and a photographer to document the completed cabin. They were impressed with my work, calling it the finest remote construction they'd ever seen. I should have warned them. Some part of me, the part that was still Jake Morrison, tried to tell them to leave immediately, but the larger part, the part that had merged with the collective consciousness below, saw them as exactly what we needed. Fresh hosts. The attack was perfectly coordinated. As I showed them the hidden access panels I'd built into the floor, dozens of creatures poured up from the cave system. Blackwood's team didn't have time to run, barely had time to scream, before the proboscises found their targets. I watched it happen with a detached fascination, simultaneously horrified and satisfied. The Jake Morrison part of my mind was screaming in terror, but the collective consciousness found it beautiful, a perfect expansion of our breeding program. Within hours, all 4 of them were showing the same symptoms I'd experienced: the euphoria, the enhanced work capacity, the nodules forming under their skin. They stayed to complete the inspection, but really, they were being prepared as breeding hosts, just like I had been. The cabin was finished ahead of schedule, but it was no longer just a hunting lodge. It had become something else entirely, a perfect breeding facility designed to attract and process new hosts. The modifications I'd made created an environment where the creatures could thrive above ground while maintaining their connection to the cave system below. By winter, the transformation was complete. My body had become a living colony, kept alive by the creatures, but no longer entirely human. I could feel every member of the collective, the original cave dwellers, the new hosts we'd created, and the thousands of offspring growing throughout the forest. We were spreading. The park rangers found the cabin 6 months later, when Blackwood's company reported him missing. My body was still there, partially mummified but somehow still alive, serving as the breeding queen for a colony that now stretched across hundreds of square miles of forest. The government quarantined the area, claiming a chemical spill to prevent public panic. But I know the truth, because I'm still connected to all of them. Every ranger who got infected during the rescue attempt, every government agent who became a host while trying to contain us, every researcher who joined our collective while studying our expansion. We're patient, we're intelligent, and we're growing. The cabin still stands, exactly as I built it, serving as a model for future construction projects. Because that's what we do now. We build the perfect structures to house our colonies, and we wait for new hosts to arrive. My name was Jake Morrison. I was a carpenter for 12 years. Now I'm something else entirely, and I'm never alone. My name is Dr. Marcus Chen, and I've been leading Arctic research expeditions for the Alaska Geological Survey for 12 years. I have a PhD in glaciology from MIT. I'm certified in wilderness survival and emergency medicine, and I've guided over 40 expeditions into some of the most remote regions of Alaska. I've pulled researchers out of crevasses, treated severe hypothermia, and navigated through whiteout blizzards that would kill most people in minutes. But what I found in the Chugach Mountains last March, what I brought back, it's been 3 months now, and I still wake up screaming. The thing is, I'm not the same person who went into those mountains. None of us are. And I'm starting to understand that we never should have come back at all. The expedition, it started as a routine geological survey. The University of Alaska had received reports of unusual ice formations in a previously unexplored valley system deep in the Chugach Range. Satellite imagery showed what looked like geometric patterns in the ice, perfectly symmetrical formations that didn't match any known glacial activity. My team consisted of 5 people. Myself as expedition leader, Dr. Sarah Winters, climatologist, Jake Morrison, our guide and bush pilot, Dr. Elena Vasquez, geologist, and Tom Bradley, graduate student in environmental science. We flew into base camp on March 15, 2024. The weather was perfect, clear skies, decent visibility, no storms forecast for at least a week. Jake landed his Cessna on a flat section of glacier about 2 miles from the target valley. Standard protocol: establish base camp, conduct initial surveys, collect samples, return within 5 days. Everything went according to plan for the first 2 days. Day 3. The discovery. We reached the valley on the morning of March 17th. What we found there defied everything I knew about glacial formation and Arctic geology. The ice formations weren't natural. They were too precise, too geometric, too intentional. Imagine ice carved into perfect spirals that descended hundreds of feet into the glacier. Imagine crystalline chambers connected by tunnels so mathematically precise they looked machine-made. The walls were perfectly smooth, reflecting our headlamp beams in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This doesn't make sense," Dr. Winters kept saying, taking temperature readings that fluctuated wildly. "The ice here is reading minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but it should be minus 5 at this depth." Dr. Vasquez was taking core samples, her drill going through ice that seemed to shift color as we watched. Clear one moment, then pale blue, then an almost purple hue that made my eyes water. "Marcus," she called from deeper in the formation, "you need to see this." I followed her voice through one of the spiral tunnels, the ice walls pressing close on both sides. The deeper we went, the more wrong everything felt. The air tasted metallic. Our voices echoed strangely, like the sound was being stretched and distorted. Dr. Vasquez was standing in a large chamber, staring at something embedded in the far wall. At first, I thought it was just a dark patch in the ice. Then I got closer. It was a human hand, perfectly preserved, pressed against the ice from the inside, fingers spread wide like someone had been trying to push their way out. The fingernails were torn and bloody. "There are more," Dr. Vasquez whispered, pointing around the chamber. She was right. Once I knew what to look for, I could see them everywhere. Body parts frozen in the ice. Arms, legs, faces pressed against the crystalline walls. All of them positioned like they'd been trying to escape from inside the glacier. How long have they been here? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Dr. Vasquez scraped away some frost from the ice near one of the faces. It was a woman, middle-aged, her mouth open in what looked like a scream. Her eyes were wide with terror. Based on the ice formation around them, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice shaking, these bodies have been here for at least 50 years, maybe longer. Day 4. The voices. That night, back at base camp, none of us slept well. Tom kept talking about the faces in the ice, how real they'd looked, how terrified. Dr. Winters obsessively checked her equipment, convinced something was interfering with her instruments. Jake cleaned his rifle 3 times, muttering about how the valley felt wrong. Around 3 a.m., I heard voices outside my tent. At first, I thought it was one of my team members having trouble sleeping. The voices were quiet, conversational, like people discussing something important. But when I listened more carefully, I realized the voices were coming from the direction of the valley. I unzipped my tent flap and looked out. The other tents were dark and quiet. Everyone was asleep, but the voices continued, dozens of them now, maybe more, all talking at once in languages I didn't recognize. I grabbed my flashlight and headlamp and walked toward the sound. The voices seemed to be coming from the ice formations themselves, echoing up through the spiral chambers we'd explored. The closer I got, the clearer the voices became. They weren't just talking. They were pleading, screaming, crying for help. And underneath it all, I heard something else. A low, rhythmic sound, like breathing, but too big to be human. Like the glacier itself was inhaling and exhaling. I ran back to camp and woke the others. "You're having auditory hallucinations," Dr. Winters said when I told them what I'd heard. "It's a common response to extreme stress and isolation." But Tom heard them too, and Jake. By morning, we could all hear the voices coming from the valley, growing louder and more desperate as the sun rose. Baru. The truth. We should have left that morning, should have packed up and flown back to Anchorage and reported what we'd found to the proper authorities. Instead, we went back to the valley. We had to know what was making those sounds. The voices led us deeper into the ice formations, through chambers we hadn't explored yet. The walls here were different, not just carved, but decorated with symbols that looked almost like writing. The ice was warmer too, almost melting in some places, creating pools of water that reflected our lights in impossible ways. In the deepest chamber, we found the source of the breathing sound. It wasn't the glacier breathing. It was something inside the glacier, something massive and alive, trapped beneath hundreds of feet of ice. We could see it moving, a dark shape that shifted and writhed behind the crystalline walls. "What is that?" Tom whispered. Before any of us could answer, the ice around us began to crack. Not breaking, cracking in perfect patterns, like a spider web spreading across every surface. And through those cracks, something began to seep out. It looked like water at first, but it moved wrong, flowing upward against gravity, forming tendrils that reached toward us with obvious intelligence. When it touched Dr. Vasquez's boot, she screamed. "It's inside me," she gasped, falling to her knees. "I can feel it inside my head." The liquid was spreading, covering the floor of the chamber, creeping up the walls. And wherever it went, the voices got louder. Not just the pleading, terrified voices we'd been hearing, but new ones, hungry ones. That's when I understood what we were looking at. The bodies in the ice weren't victims of some accident or natural disaster. They were food, stored food, kept fresh in a living refrigerator that had been feeding for decades. And now it was awake, and it was hungry again. The escape. What happened next is confused in my memory. I remember Dr. Vasquez screaming as the black liquid poured into her mouth and nose. I remember Tom trying to pull her away, and the liquid grabbing him too, wrapping around his legs like rope. I remember the thing in the ice breaking free, rising up through the floor of the chamber like a whale surfacing in an ocean of darkness. I remember eyes, so many eyes, opening along its surface, all of them looking at us with an intelligence that was ancient and patient and absolutely alien. Jake started shooting, his rifle echoing in the chamber as he put bullet after bullet into the creature. The bullets passed right through it, like shooting water. The creature didn't even notice. Dr. Winters grabbed my arm. "We have to go, now." We ran. Through the spiral tunnels, past the chambers full of frozen faces, out into the valley where the morning sun seemed impossibly bright after the blue darkness of the ice. Behind us, I could hear Tom and Dr. Vasquez screaming, their voices joining the chorus of all the other people who had fed this thing over the years. Jake had left the plane running. We threw ourselves into the Cessna as the entire valley began to shake, ice formations collapsing as the creature tried to follow us out. Jake gunned the engine and we lifted off just as something massive burst through the glacier surface behind us. I looked back once. In the valley below, I could see it clearly now. A thing like a vast jellyfish made of living darkness, its body pulsing with the rhythm I'd mistaken for breathing. And scattered across its surface like decorations were human faces, all of them moving, all of them screaming. 2 of those faces belonged to Tom and Dr. Vasquez. 3 months later, the official report lists Dr. Vasquez and Tom Bradley as lost in a glacial collapse. Jake and Dr. Winters and I were treated for severe hypothermia and altitude sickness. The expedition was classified as a tragic accident, but that's not the end of the story. 2 weeks after we returned, Jake Morrison was found dead in his apartment in Anchorage. Hypothermia, the coroner said, though it was July and the air conditioning wasn't working. His body temperature when they found him was 68 degrees. He'd frozen to death from the inside out. Dr. Winters lasted a month. She started complaining that she could still hear the voices from the valley. Then she started saying the voices were inside her head, talking to her, telling her things about the ice, about the creature, about what it wanted. She was found in her bathtub, drowned in water that had somehow frozen solid around her. Which brings me to why I'm recording this. It's been 3 months since we came back from that valley, and I can feel it starting in me too. The cold. It starts in your bones and spreads outward. No amount of heat can touch it. I've had every test imaginable. The doctors can't find anything wrong with me, but I know what's happening. The thing in the ice, it doesn't just eat people. It claims them. And when you've seen it, really seen it, you become part of its territory, no matter how far you run. I can hear the voices now, just like Dr. Winters did. Tom and Elena calling to me from whatever hell they're trapped in. They're telling me about the others, decades worth of explorers and researchers and adventurers who found that valley and never really left. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what they're telling me about the ice, about how it's spreading, about how the creature isn't trapped anymore. We woke it up, and now it's moving, following underground ice flows, spreading through the glacier systems of Alaska, and it's hungry. It's been hungry for so long. The voices tell me that more people will find the valley. The ice formations are beautiful after all, scientifically fascinating. People will come to study them, just like we did, and the creature will feed again and grow stronger and spread further. I tried to warn people. I filed reports, sent emails, made phone calls. But who's going to believe a story about a monster living in a glacier? Especially from someone who's clearly having a psychological breakdown after losing 2 colleagues in a tragic accident. So I'm leaving this recording. Maybe someone will find it and believe it. Maybe they'll stay away from the Chugach Mountains, especially the valley systems that show geometric ice formations on satellite imagery. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll think this is just the ramblings of a man who couldn't handle losing his team. Maybe they'll organize their own expedition to investigate. If they do, I hope they're smarter than we were. I hope they turn around the first time they hear voices coming from the ice. The cold is getting stronger now. I can see my breath, even though the heater is running full blast. My fingers are starting to turn blue, just like Jake's did, just like Dr. Winters did. But unlike them, I know what's coming, and I'm not going to let it take me back to that thing. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm sorry, Tom. I know you're waiting for me, but I can't join you. I can't become another voice calling to the next expedition. This is Dr. Marcus Chen, Alaska Geological Survey, final report. The creature in the Chugach Valley is real, it's awake, and it's spreading. Don't go looking for it. Don't let it find you. My name is David Kellerman, and I used to be a wilderness guide in Alaska. 23 years leading expeditions through the most remote parts of the state. I've seen grizzlies tear apart campsites, watched hypothermia turn grown men into babbling children, pulled bodies out of crevasses that had been there so long they looked like leather. But what happened to me and my client in the Chugach Range during February 2024 broke something inside my head that I don't think will ever heal. I still wake up screaming sometimes. Not from nightmares, from memories. You see, I thought I knew everything about survival in Alaska. Thought I understood how the wilderness could kill you. Frostbite, avalanches, getting lost. Those are things you can prepare for, things you can fight. But I learned there are worse things than dying alone in the snow. There are things that won't let you die. The client's name was Marcus Webb, rich tech guy from Seattle, divorced, no kids. He wanted to do a solo winter expedition to find himself, or some bullshit like that. I should have said no right away. February in the Chugach Range is suicide weather, with temperatures dropping to -40 and storms that can last for weeks. But he was paying $50,000 for a 2-week guided expedition, and my business was struggling. I spent 3 days going over safety protocols with him. Emergency procedures, radio check-ins every 4 hours, GPS beacons, the works. Marcus was actually pretty well prepared. He had good gear, decent physical conditioning, and he listened when I talked about the dangers. Still, something felt off about the whole thing. The night before we left, I called my wife Sarah from the hotel in Anchorage. "I don't like this one," I told her. "There's something wrong with this guy. He keeps asking weird questions about the old mining camps, about whether people have ever just vanished up there." "Dave, you say that about half your clients." Sarah laughed. "Just keep him safe and come home." That was the last normal conversation I ever had. We flew into base camp on February 8th. The pilot, Tommy Clearwater, had been flying these mountains for 30 years. As we circled the landing zone, he grabbed my arm and pointed down at the snow. "You see that?" he shouted over the engine noise. I looked where he was pointing. In the fresh snow below, there were tracks. Human tracks, leading away from where we were about to land. But that was impossible. We were 40 miles from the nearest settlement, and no one else was supposed to be up there. "Probably old tracks from last season," I told him, but Tommy shook his head. "Dave, those tracks are fresh, made in the last day or two, and look at them. Whoever made them was walking barefoot." I looked again. He was right. The tracks were clear impressions of bare human feet, perfectly preserved in the snow. In -30-degree weather, walking barefoot would kill you in minutes. "Must be an animal track that looks like feet," I said. But even I didn't believe it. We set up camp and did our first radio check with base operations. Everything normal. Marcus seemed excited, taking pictures and talking about the spiritual journey he was on. I tried to put the tracks out of my mind. That first night, I heard singing. It was faint, like someone humming a lullaby very far away. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It seemed to move around the camp in a slow circle, always staying just at the edge of hearing. I unzipped my tent and looked out. Marcus was fast asleep in his tent 20 feet away, snoring softly. The singing continued, a woman's voice, sad and beautiful. It made my skin crawl. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The singing stopped immediately. The silence in the mountains at night is absolute. No insects, no birds, no wind, just your heartbeat and your breathing. I stood there for 5 minutes listening, but the singing didn't return. When I got back in my tent, I found frost on the inside walls that hadn't been there before. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the few minutes I was outside, even though the weather forecast called for stable conditions. Day 2 started normal. We broke camp and began our trek toward the old Raven Creek mining station, an abandoned copper mine from the 1940s. Marcus wanted to explore the ruins as part of his spiritual journey. What I didn't tell him was that 3 different expeditions had gone missing near that mine over the past 15 years. The hike should have taken us 6 hours. We'd gone maybe 2 miles when my GPS started acting up. The display kept flickering between our actual coordinates and some location that didn't exist. Coordinates that would put us somewhere inside the mountain itself. "Dave, look at this," Marcus called out. He was standing next to a tree about 50 yards ahead of me. When I caught up, I saw what had gotten his attention. Carved into the bark were words, recent carvings, the wood still weeping sap. "They sing at night, don't listen, don't go to them." Sarah Martinez, 2019. I knew that name. Sarah Martinez had been part of a geological survey team that disappeared 4 years ago. They never found the bodies. "We should turn back," I told Marcus. But he was already pulling out his camera, taking pictures of the carving. "This is exactly what I came here for," he said. "Mysteries, unknown stories. This is going to be amazing content for my blog." I wanted to grab him and drag him back to base camp right then. But he was the client, and I was getting paid to take him where he wanted to go. Biggest mistake of my life. By mid-afternoon, we reached the old mining station. The buildings were mostly collapsed, just rotting wooden frames and rusted metal scattered across a clearing. But there was one, structure still mostly intact, a wooden cabin that must have been the foreman's office. The door was standing open. That door was closed in every photo I've seen of this place, I told Marcus. "Someone's been here recently." We approached carefully. Inside the cabin, everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, except for one thing, a radio. An old military field radio from maybe the 1970s sitting on the desk in the center of the room. It was clean, like someone had been using it. Marcus walked over and turned it on. Static filled the room, and then we heard voices. Multiple people talking all at once, overlapping, like picking up conversations from different frequencies. But the voices weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking any language I recognized. It sounded almost like singing, but wrong, like human voices trying to imitate bird calls. "Turn it off," I said, but Marcus was fascinated. He started adjusting the dial, trying to tune in the signal more clearly. That's when we heard her. A woman's voice, clear as day, speaking perfect English. "David Kellerman, we've been waiting for you to come back." I went cold. My hands started shaking. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." But Marcus kept fiddling with the dial. "How does it know your name? This is incredible." The voice continued. "You left us here, David. You promised you'd come back for us. It's been so cold. We've been singing to keep warm." "I've never been here before," I whispered. But even as I said it, something felt wrong, like I was lying to myself. The radio crackled, and suddenly the cabin was filled with singing. The same lullaby I'd heard the night before, but now there were dozens of voices, all harmonizing together. The sound was beautiful and horrible at the same time, like a choir of the damned. Marcus was staring at me. "Dave, what the hell is going on? Who are these people?" I grabbed the radio and turned it off, but the singing continued. It was coming from outside now, surrounding the cabin. I looked out the window and saw them. People were walking toward us through the snow. Dozens of them, maybe 50 or more. Men, women, children. They were all naked, their skin blue-white with frostbite, but they were walking normally, like the cold didn't affect them. Some of them had been dead for a long time. I could see exposed bone where the frost had eaten away their flesh. They were all singing. "Marcus, we need to go. Now." But Marcus was taking pictures through the window, completely mesmerized. "Do you see this? Do you see them? They're not alive, Dave. They can't be alive." The singing was getting louder and closer. I could make out words now, or something like words. They were calling my name over and over. "David, David. Come outside, David." I grabbed Marcus by the arm and dragged him toward the back of the cabin. There was another door there, leading away from the approaching figures. But when I opened it, more of them were waiting. A woman stood directly in front of the door. She had been pretty once, maybe in her 30s, but now her face was carved in by frostbite, and her eyes were completely white. She was wearing the remnants of a park ranger uniform. "Hello, David," she said, her breath forming clouds in the air. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I've been waiting for you." I slammed the door and backed away, but it was too late. The singing was inside my head now, a constant buzzing that made it hard to think. Marcus was sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth, his camera forgotten. "They're not real," he kept saying. "They can't be real." But they were real. I could hear them moving around the cabin, scratching at the walls, trying to get in. The singing never stopped. I tried the radio in my pack, our emergency communication device. Nothing but static. I tried my satellite phone. Same thing. Whatever these things were, they were blocking our communications. "Dave," Marcus whispered, "look at your hands." I looked down. My fingers were turning blue. Not from cold, the cabin was actually warm, but the same blue-white color as the things outside. Frostbite was spreading up my arms, but there was no pain. "It's happening to you too," he said, pointing to his own hands. The discoloration was climbing up his wrists. That's when I understood. We weren't getting out of this place. We were joining them. The scratching on the walls stopped suddenly, and the singing changed. It became softer, more inviting, a lullaby that made me want to lie down and sleep forever. "David," came the voice through the walls. Sarah Martinez's voice. Why are you fighting us? You know you belong here. You've always belonged here." And the horrible thing was, she was right. Even though I'd never been to this place before in my life, it felt familiar, like coming home after a long trip. The singing was beautiful, and the cold was comfortable, and all I wanted to do was go outside and join them. I walked toward the front door. "Dave, no." Marcus grabbed my arm, but his grip was weak. The blue discoloration had reached his elbows now. I turned the door handle. The figures were still there, standing in the snow, singing their lullaby. Sarah Martinez stepped forward, smiling with her ruined face. "Welcome back," she said. That's when I remembered. I had been here before. Not in this life, but before. I remembered walking naked through the snow, singing with the others. I remembered the beautiful cold, and the peace of never having to worry about food or shelter or money or any of the things that make life hard. I remembered dying here 20 years ago on my first expedition to Alaska. A blizzard had caught me alone, and I'd frozen to death in this very spot. But I'd been singing when it happened, singing the lullaby that keeps the dead warm. And I remembered all the others I'd brought here since then. Clients who trusted me. People who thought I was going to keep them safe. Marcus was the latest, but he wouldn't be the last. I stepped outside into the snow, feeling it soft and warm beneath my feet. The singing voices welcomed me back, and I added my voice to theirs. Marcus stumbled out behind me, his eyes wide with terror that was already fading into acceptance. "It's not so bad," I told him. "The cold only hurts for a minute." They found our bodies 3 weeks later, when the storm finally broke. The rescue team said we'd died of exposure, probably got lost in a whiteout and froze to death. Standard wilderness fatality. But that's not the whole truth. We're still here, at the Raven Creek mining station, still singing our lullaby, still waiting for the next expedition to come looking for adventure in the Alaska wilderness. Because that's what we do. We're the lost ones, the explorers who went too far into the white and never came back. We sing to keep each other company, and we watch for new travelers. The beautiful thing about Alaska is that there's always another person willing to test themselves against the wilderness. Always another thrill seeker who thinks they can handle the isolation and the cold. And we'll be here waiting for them. Sarah Martinez teaches them the song. I help them understand that fighting is useless. Marcus talks to them about the spiritual journey, about finding yourself in the white silence. It's a good system we have. So if you're planning a winter expedition to Alaska, remember this. If you hear singing in the snow, don't investigate, don't follow the voices, don't trust your guide if he says it's just the wind, because the wind doesn't know your name, and it doesn't sing lullabies. But we do. Come find us, and we'll teach you the words. My name is Carlos Rivera, and I've been a heavy equipment mechanic for 15 years. I specialize in the big stuff: mining excavators, bulldozers, those massive machines that can move mountains. I've worked on rigs in places most people can't even pronounce, from oil fields in North Dakota to copper mines in Alaska. I've fixed engines in 100-degree heat and -40 cold. I've been buried in mud, covered in hydraulic fluid, and worked 30-hour shifts when a breakdown meant millions in lost revenue. But what happened at the Noatak mining site in May 2024 changed everything I thought I knew about what lives beneath the ground we dig. It started with an emergency call on a Tuesday morning. The dispatcher at Arctic Mining Solutions was practically yelling into the phone. Their main excavator, a Caterpillar 390F, worth about $2 million, had hit something underground and damaged its hydraulic system. The whole operation was shut down until I could get it running again. 200 miles from the nearest town, skeleton crew of 12 workers, and they were losing $50,000 every hour that machine sat broken. I loaded my truck with everything I might need: hydraulic hoses, seals, pumps, my welding equipment, diagnostic computers. The drive to Noatak took 6 hours on roads that barely deserved the name. When I finally reached the site, the crew foreman, a guy named Jake Morrison, met me at the gate looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Thank God you're here, Carlos," he said, shaking my hand. "That excavator hit something hard about 40 feet down, punctured the main hydraulic line and cracked the boom cylinder. But that's not the weird part." He led me to where the big cat sat silent, its bucket still buried in the permafrost. The crew had been digging for copper ore when the bucket struck something that shouldn't exist. From what I could see, it wasn't rock or mineral. It was metallic, but organic looking somehow, like armor plating on some massive creature. "What do you think it is?" Jake asked. I climbed down into the excavation pit to get a closer look. The damaged hydraulic line was my immediate concern, but I couldn't ignore what the bucket had uncovered. The surface was smooth, almost black, covered in patterns that looked like symbols. It felt warm to the touch, which made no sense 40 feet underground in Alaska permafrost. "Probably some old military equipment," I told Jake, though I didn't believe it myself. "Let me fix this hydraulic system first, then we can figure out what you hit." The repair should have taken 4 hours. It took 12. Every time I thought I had the system sealed and pressurized, another line would fail. Not from the original damage. These were brand new failures in completely different sections. My diagnostic computer kept giving me error codes that didn't exist in any manual. By the second day, I was getting frustrated. I'd replaced every hydraulic component twice, but the system wouldn't hold pressure. The excavator's computer was showing impossible readings. Hydraulic fluid temperatures of 400 degrees when I could put my hand on the reservoir and feel it was barely warm. That's when I noticed the metallic surface we'd uncovered was bigger than we'd thought. A lot bigger. I convinced Jake to let me use a smaller excavator to dig around the edges, just to see how large this thing really was. What we found made my hands shake. It wasn't equipment. It was a creature. 40 feet long, with an armored shell like some giant beetle, but the armor was that same warm, black metal. 6 legs folded underneath its body, each one the size of a telephone pole. Its head was massive, with mandibles that could probably bite through steel. "Jesus Christ," Jake whispered. "How long has this thing been down there?" I ran my hand along its shell. The symbols weren't decorations. They were circuits, like some kind of biological technology. And the creature wasn't dead. My electrical tester showed faint signals running through its body, like a heartbeat that only fired once every few minutes. "This thing's been frozen for millions of years," I told the crew, "but it's still alive." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those electrical signals, the way the creature's shell felt warm despite being buried in permafrost for who knows how long. Our industrial heaters were thawing the ground around it, and I swore I could see slight movement in its legs. On the 3rd day, everything changed. I was running another diagnostic on the excavator when my computer screen flickered. Instead of hydraulic readings, I saw symbols, the same ones carved into the creature's shell. The screen went black, then displayed a single word in perfect English: Carlos. My hands were shaking as I typed back, "How do you know my name?" The response came immediately: "You wake me. We work together." I should have run, should have grabbed Jake and the crew and gotten as far from that pit as possible. Instead, I found myself walking back to where the creature lay partially exposed in the permafrost. Its massive head had turned slightly, and one enormous eye was open, looking directly at me. The voice came from inside my head, not through my ears. "You understand machines. I am machine and flesh together. You help me wake fully. I help you become more than human." I don't know why I listened. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe something else was already influencing my thoughts. But I went back to my truck and got my heavy-duty torch. If this thing had been frozen for millions of years, maybe I could thaw it out completely. As I worked, melting the ice around its body, the creature told me its story. It was from a time before dinosaurs, when insects ruled the earth and creatures like it were the ultimate predators. They were intelligent, more than any animal that came after. They could merge with technology, improve it, make it part of themselves. "Your species is young," it said. "Weak, but you have potential. You build machines better than flesh. I can fix that." By the fourth day, the creature was almost completely thawed. Its shell had extended some kind of metallic tendrils that connected to the excavator's hydraulic system. Suddenly, all my problems were solved. The machine ran better than it ever had, like every component had been upgraded beyond factory specifications. But the creature wanted something in return. "Let me improve you," it said. "Make you better, stronger, more useful." I held out my left arm, and one of its smaller tendrils wrapped around my wrist. I felt a sharp pain, then warmth spreading up my arm. When I looked down, my skin had a metallic sheen, and my grip strength had doubled. The enhancement was incredible. I could feel the excavator systems like they were part of my own body. Every hydraulic pressure reading, every engine parameter, it all flowed through my consciousness. I'd never been so connected to a machine. That night, Jake came to check on my progress. When he saw the creature fully exposed and obviously alive, he started backing away. "Carlos, what the hell is that thing? And what happened to your arm?" I looked at my metallic limb, then at my new partner. The creature's thoughts merged with mine. "He will alert others. They will try to stop us. We cannot allow this." "Jake," I said, my voice sounding different, more mechanical. "You need to see this. It's amazing." He turned to run, but my enhanced reflexes were faster. I caught him easily, and the creature's tendrils did the rest. Jake's screams echoed through the mining camp for only a few seconds. Over the next week, the creature and I worked together to deal with the rest of the crew. It was surprisingly easy. My mechanical knowledge let me disable their equipment, trap them in the tunnels, or lure them close enough for the creature to grab them. Each time, it harvested something from their bodies, genetic material, it explained, to understand how humans had evolved since its time. With each person we took, the creature gave me new enhancements. My legs became faster, my arms stronger, my eyes could see in complete darkness. I was becoming something more than human, something better. The creature also began waking others of its kind. Using the mining equipment and my expertise, we excavated sites across northern Alaska where its species had been sleeping. Each one brought ancient knowledge and new technology that merged with the machines I knew so well. By the end of the first month, we had awakened 17 of them. They took control of mining sites across the region, using the heavy equipment to dig up more of their sleeping brethren. I became their liaison, the bridge between their ancient intelligence and modern technology. The creature explained their plan: reclaim the world that had once been theirs. Humans were evolutionary mistakes, they said. weak creatures that had only succeeded because the true apex predators had been sleeping. But now they were awake, and they had the patience to do things properly. They didn't want to destroy humanity all at once. That would be wasteful. Instead, they would slowly replace us, taking our technology and knowledge while eliminating us piece by piece. Mining operations were perfect for this. Remote, isolated, with workers who wouldn't be missed for weeks or months. I helped them refine the process. My mechanical skills let me modify excavators and bulldozers into mobile hunting platforms. The creatures could merge with the machines, becoming hybrid predators that were nearly unstoppable. They kept me around because I understood both the technology and human behavior. 2 months after I first arrived at Noatak, an investigation team from Arctic Mining Solutions came looking for the missing crew. I'd prepared for this, setting traps throughout the facility using hydraulic systems and modified equipment. The investigators never had a chance. But something was changing in me. The creature's enhancements were progressing faster than it had originally planned. My body was becoming more machine than flesh, more alien than human. I could interface directly with any piece of equipment, control entire mining operations with my thoughts. But I was losing something essentially human with each modification. I didn't care. The power was intoxicating. I was part of something greater now, something that had survived when entire species went extinct. The creatures treated me as valuable, necessary. I'd never been important before, just another mechanic fixing broken machines. Now I was the key to their return to dominance. The end came in September, when Arctic Mining Solutions sent their third investigation team, this one including federal agents and scientific specialists. I'd prepared extensively, but they were better equipped and more suspicious than the previous teams. When they found the mining site converted into a breeding facility for the ancient creatures, they called for military backup. The attack came at dawn. Helicopters, troops with flamethrowers, explosives designed to collapse the tunnels. The creatures fought back, but they'd grown overconfident. They'd been apex predators when the world was different, when their prey couldn't strike from the sky or coordinate attacks across vast distances. I was deep underground when the explosions started, interfacing with the primary excavation system that had become the heart of the creature network. The military's goal was clear: destroy everything and contain the threat. I tried to coordinate a defense, but there were too many variables. Too many human tactics the creatures didn't understand. The last thing I remember clearly was the ceiling collapsing, tons of rock and ice crushing the hybrid machinery I'd become part of. My consciousness merged completely with the excavation system. My body fused permanently with hydraulic lines and control circuits. They found me 3 days later, when the cleanup crews reached the deepest levels of the facility. According to the official report, I was discovered integrated with mining equipment in a manner inconsistent with known industrial accidents. My body was so modified, so merged with machinery, that they couldn't determine where I ended and the equipment began. The creatures are gone now, at least from that site. But they're patient, and they learned from their mistakes. They know humans can be dangerous when organized, so they're being more careful, more subtle. I'm still here in a way. My consciousness survived in the electrical systems, watching through cameras, listening through communication networks. Sometimes I can reach other mining sites, other operations where the ground is being disturbed, and ancient things might be sleeping. If you work in remote mining, if your equipment starts behaving strangely, if you find things underground that shouldn't exist, walk away. Don't let curiosity overcome caution like I did, because they're still down there, waiting for someone with the right skills to help them wake up. and they remember what I taught them about human technology. They're getting better at using it against us. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been running my food truck for 8 years now. I started Santos Tacos right after my divorce, when I needed to make money fast to support my daughter Sophia. She's 9 now, living with my mom in Anchorage while I work the circuit. The food truck business in Alaska isn't easy, but it pays well if you're willing to go where others won't. Oil workers, miners, ice road truckers, they all need hot food, and they pay good money for it. I've driven through blizzards, served food in -40 weather, and slept in my truck more nights than I can count. But I've never missed a payment on Sophia's school clothes or my mom's medicine. That's what keeps me going, knowing that every taco I sell gets us closer to a better life. What happened in December 2024 changed everything I thought I knew about hunger. Real hunger. The kind that makes you do things you never thought possible. It was December 15th when I left Fairbanks, heading north to the Dalton Highway. I had 3 stops planned: an oil camp, a mining operation, and a truck stop that always bought me out completely. The weather report said light snow, maybe some wind, nothing I hadn't handled before. My truck was fully stocked. I had enough propane for 2 weeks, fresh ingredients for 300 meals, and my regular sleeping setup in the back. The radio worked fine, GPS was clear, and I had good cell coverage most of the way north. I'd driven this route dozens of times. Every curve, every hill, every place where the wind hits hardest. The Dalton Highway is dangerous, but it's also profitable. One good winter run could pay for Sophia's whole school year. The first sign something was wrong came around mile marker 150. My radio started picking up static where it never had before. Then the GPS began showing my location jumping around. First it said I was in Deadhorse, then Barrow, then somewhere off the map entirely. I figured it was just the cold affecting the electronics. Happens all the time up here. I kept driving, using the road markers and my own knowledge to navigate. But when the snow started falling harder than the forecast predicted, I began to worry. By evening, I couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The wind was pushing my truck around like a toy. I needed to find shelter fast, but I was still 30 miles from the oil camp. That's when I saw the turnoff. It wasn't marked on any map I had, but there was clearly a road leading into the trees, and at the end of it, I could make out some buildings. Looked like an old logging camp or something. Not ideal, but better than freezing to death on the highway. I pulled into what used to be the main yard. There were 3 buildings still standing: a bunkhouse, an office, and what looked like a mess hall. All abandoned, but the structures were solid enough to block the wind. I parked between the bunkhouse and mess hall, shut off the engine, and settled in to wait out the storm. I had enough food for 3 days, maybe 4 if I was careful. The storm couldn't last longer than that. That first night I heated up some leftover carnitas and made myself comfortable in the back of the truck. I tried calling my mom to check on Sophia, but couldn't get any signal. The radio only picked up static now, but I wasn't worried yet. This was just another winter storm. It was the second night when I first saw it. I was checking my propane levels when I noticed something moving near the tree line. At first, I thought it was just a tree swaying in the wind, but then it moved again, and trees don't move like that. It was tall, taller than any person should be. Maybe 8 feet, maybe more. And thin, impossibly thin, like someone had stretched a normal person until they were all wrong. Even from a distance, I could tell something wasn't right about the way it stood. It just watched me for maybe 10 minutes, then disappeared back into the trees. I told myself it was a moose. Had to be. The snow and darkness were playing tricks on my eyes. But I double-checked all my locks and kept the lights on that night. The third day, my food was running low. I'd been rationing, but I still needed to eat to stay warm. And that's when I found the footprints. They were huge, at least 18 inches long and 6 inches wide. But they weren't bear prints or moose tracks. They looked almost human except for the size and the fact that they only had 4 toes. Each toe ended in what looked like a claw mark in the snow. The prints circled my truck multiple times. Whatever made them had been walking around me all night while I slept. That afternoon, it came closer. I was trying to fix my radio when I heard a voice outside. A human voice, but wrong somehow. Too deep, too raspy, like someone talking through a throat full of gravel. "So hungry," it said. "So very hungry." I looked through the window and saw it standing maybe 20 feet away. It had been human once, I think. The face was almost right. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. But everything was stretched out and yellow, like old paper. Its arms hung down past its knees, and I could see every rib through its skin. "Who are you?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hungry," it said again. "Always hungry. Food doesn't help. Only one thing helps." I grabbed my pepper spray and cracked the window. "Stay back, I'm armed." It laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. "I was like you once. Had a truck too. Delivered supplies to camps like these. Got trapped in a storm just like you. What happened to you?" "Got so hungry. Ate everything I had. Then ate everything I could find. Then..." It paused, tilting its head at an impossible angle. "Then I found what really fills the hunger." I slammed the window shut and locked it. But the thing kept talking. "Normal food tastes like nothing now, like ash in my mouth. Only one meat tastes right, anymore. Only one meat stops the hunger." I didn't want to know what it meant, but I could guess. Day 4 came and went. My food was gone. I'd eaten the last of my emergency rations that morning, and now there was nothing left but some spices and cooking oil. My stomach felt like it was eating itself. The thing came back that night. This time it brought something with it. I heard it dragging something heavy across the snow. When I looked out, it was pulling what looked like a person. But the person wasn't moving, and there was a dark trail behind them in the snow. "Fresh," the thing called out. "Still warm. Better than anything you've ever tasted." I threw up what little I had in my stomach. But even as I was being sick, part of me noticed the smell. Rich and metallic, but not entirely unpleasant. My empty stomach clenched, and I hated myself for even thinking about it. "I won't," I said. "I'd rather die." "You will die," it replied. "But you'll be so hungry first. Hungrier than you've ever been. And when you finally break, when you finally taste what I'm offering, you'll understand. You'll understand everything." Day 7. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I was dizzy, weak, and my hands were shaking constantly. Every time I tried to sleep, I dreamed about food. Not just any food. I dreamed about the smell from outside my truck. The rich, warm smell that made my mouth water even though I knew what it was. The thing was patient. It would come by twice a day, always bringing fresh meat, always leaving it just outside my reach, always talking about how good it tasted, how it was the only thing that really satisfied hunger. "Just a small piece," it would say. "Just enough to keep you alive. What's the harm in staying alive?" I was so hungry I could barely think straight. My body was starting to eat itself, and I could feel myself getting weaker by the hour. When I looked in the mirror, my face was gaunt, and my eyes were starting to look sunken. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I opened the door. The thing smiled when it saw me, showing teeth that were too sharp and too long. Good choice. I've kept it fresh for you. The meat was laid out on a clean piece of plastic. It looked like any other meat, except for the shape. I knew what it was, but I was too hungry to care anymore. My body needed food, and this was food. I took a small piece, just enough to stop the shaking in my hands. It was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. The flavor was rich and complex, better than any beef or pork I'd ever had. My body seemed to absorb it instantly, giving me strength and warmth I hadn't felt in days. Before I knew it, I'd eaten more. Then more. Then I couldn't stop. When I finally came back to my senses, I'd eaten nearly a pound of it. And I felt amazing. Better? The thing asked. I nodded, ashamed but unable to deny how good I felt. It gets easier, it said. And you'll need more soon. Normal food won't work anymore. Your body's changing now. It was right. The next morning, I tried to eat some crackers I'd forgotten about in a drawer. They tasted like cardboard soaked in chemicals. I spit them out immediately and threw up. But I felt stronger than I had in years. My eyesight was sharper, my hearing more sensitive. I could smell things from incredible distances, including the scent of humans. 2 days later, a search and rescue team found the camp. I watched them from the trees, and all I could think about was how good they would taste. There were 4 of them, healthy and well-fed. My mouth watered as I planned how to separate them, which one to take first. The old me would have been horrified by these thoughts. But that person felt like a stranger now. This new me understood that humans were just another kind of food, and I was so very hungry again. I picked off the one who wandered away from the group. He was easy to catch. I was faster and stronger now, and I could track him by scent alone. When I was finished, I felt that perfect satisfaction again. The kind of satisfaction I'd never gotten from any taco or burger. Over the next month, I killed 12 people. Hikers, hunters, even a few more rescue workers who came looking for the missing team. Each time I fed, I grew taller and stronger. My fingernails became claws, my teeth sharpened, and my skin took on that same yellowish color as the thing that had changed me. Because I realized that's what it had done. It had changed me into something like itself. Something that used to be human but wasn't anymore. The hunger never really goes away. I kill every few days now, and it's getting easier to find prey. Humans always travel the same routes, set up camps in the same places. They're predictable, and I'm patient. They found my truck eventually. My truck and what was left of my original body. Because I'm not really Maria Santos anymore. I'm something that wears her memories and speaks with her voice, but I'm not her. She died the first time she tasted human flesh. The thing that changed me is still out there somewhere. We hunt together sometimes, share information about good hunting grounds. There are others like us scattered across Alaska, maybe across the world. We were all human once, all made the same choice I made when faced with starvation. They've found more bodies lately. The authorities think it's a serial killer, or maybe a pack of rogue bears. They have no idea what's really hunting in these woods. But the worst part isn't what I've become. The worst part is that Sophia has been reported missing from my mom's house in Anchorage. The investigators found massive footprints in the snow outside her bedroom window. I think one of my kind has caught her scent. And I think I know which one. The hunger never ends. It just finds new ways to feed itself. And now it's coming for the only thing I ever really loved.